Hello, my furniture friends. This week I'm tackling another orange toned coffee table and giving it a more contemporary look with some new stain. I picked up this solid table from my Habitat for Humanity restore for $40, which I think is a steal of a deal for a solid wood piece of furniture, especially since it's got such simple straight lines that make it pretty versatile and easy to fit into a multitude of interior design styles. My plan is to strip back this dinged up orange finish, sand out the scratches, and then restain it in a more modern colorway that still shows all of this beautiful wood grain. When I got it flipped upside down here, I found this maker's stamp on the bottom, which reads Shorewood Furniture Limited, 1995. And after a quick Google, I learned that this was made right here in New Brunswick, Canada by a small independent furniture maker, which is pretty cool. And it also looks like there was a repair in this one corner at some point. It seems to all be patched up and completely sturdy though, so I'm not going to try and disturb any of that. The legs and apron are only held together with a few bolts and screws, so it should be easy to break down, which will make refinishing each piece much more convenient for me. So this piece is glued. This one corner where the repair was made has some wood glue holding things together, so I'm going to try and wedge my putty knife in between with a few taps of the hammer just to try and break that apart. If that hadn't have come away so easily, I would have grabbed my heat gun and warmed up that glue a bit. Otherwise, I might have torn up the wood on both surfaces, and that would not be good. Next, I'm going to give each surface a quick clean with some simple green and hot water because I want to get any old furniture polish or wax residue off of here before I start sanding so that I don't accidentally grind or melt any of that junk down into the wood pores. And it's also going to help keep my sandpaper from getting clogged up so fast. I think this is an old polyurethane type finish. It just doesn't feel like an oil or wax finish to me. And I did take a few swipes at it with my carbide scraper to see if I could get the top layer off and make my sanding any easier, but I didn't get much finish off with that, so I'm just gonna go straight into sanding. I popped on a podcast in my headphones, grabbed my dust mask, and got out my 5-inch Orbital sander with some coarse 80 grit paper. I also have a hose that connects my sander to my shop vac that really helps with dust control. When I grabbed this the other day, I didn't look too closely at the grain pattern and sort of just assumed based on this yellow color that it was maple. But now that I'm looking at it up close, it is definitely not. It took me about 30 minutes to get all of that finish and yellowy orange stain off the tabletop, and then I just kept going with the apron and the legs the exact same way. To get into this little routed detail, I used my carbide scraper to get as much of the hard top coat off as I could, and then I folded a piece of sandpaper in half to get the rest of the finish out of there. All in all, my first pass of sanding with my 80 grit took me just over an hour, but the sanding is not done yet. I wiped off each piece with my microfiber cloth to get rid of any sawdust that was left behind, and then swapped out my abrasive for the next grit, which is going to be 120. Gradually moving up in grit from coarse to finer and finer is what's going to make the wood feel nice and smooth, give it a consistent color, and get the pores ready to evenly accept a new stain or finish. It's also really important to go slowly and let the machine do the work. You don't want to be pressing down or scrubbing the wood with the sander, trying to speed up the process, because that is always going to cause those little pigtails or sanding swirls that carve into the surface. It's just not a cute look. My 120 grit sand took me about another 45 minutes, and I also flipped the top over and cleaned up the bottom of that, leaving that maker's mark intact, but I wanted to have a nice clean finish on here as well. Again, I wiped off the dust on all the surfaces with my microfiber cloth, and then I started on my final sand with some 180 grit. This is fine enough that it's going to start to polish the wood fibers a bit, but not too fine that they're all closed or buffed down and won't accept new stain. Once I'd gone over everything, I wiped it all back with some denatured alcohol. Mineral spirits or just plain water would work here too. And this just makes it easier for me to see any flaws that I've missed. I'm on a mission to make sure there are no swirls here and that the color looks pretty even. I want to do a paint wash on here to neutralize the natural yellowy orange tones in the wood a bit. And I usually use Fusion Mineral Paints color Algonquin to do that, but I'm out. I did find in my paint stash though, this country chic color called Driftwood that is pretty dang close. So a paint wash is just what it sounds like. It's a wash of watered down paint that leaves behind a bit of pigment, but is still completely transparent, like any other water-based stain. I never measure anything. Paint is just not that serious, but I poured some of this paint into a separate container and then added in a bunch of water and mixed that up really thoroughly. If you're not sure, you can always do a test board. If you think it's too light or not leaving enough color behind, add in more paint. If it's too heavy or leaving too much color behind, add in more water. Anywho, I'm just going to brush this mixture over each surface of the table one at a time because I don't want this to dry before I'm done working with it, and then immediately go back over it with a shop towel or a rag to soak up all of the excess. And I always wipe this in the direction of the wood grain in case there are any streaks in there. Those will get camouflaged in that grain pattern. And it's also important to go from one edge all the way across to the other and not stop and start in the middle of the board, because you could be leaving extra pigment or rag marks there that will definitely show up when it's dry. Here's a good look at the natural bare wood beside the paint washed wood, but I'm not done yet. I left my paint wash to dry for about an hour, and now I want to add a little more depth and warm this back up a touch. So I'm also going to layer on some of this General Finishes Antique Oak water-based stain right on top. With a clean brush, I'm working even faster with this because it dries faster than the paint wash. I got a layer over the whole top, and I should have been more careful applying this all in the direction of the grain again, and probably just doing 8 or 10 inch strips at a time, but I like to live on the edge. And then again, immediately before it starts to dry at all, wiping back the excess. And this did start to dry down on me where my first few brush strokes were. So I needed to kind of buff out some marks that were left from the rag, but I got there. I got it looking even, but yeah, smaller sections at a time is definitely the way to go with this stain. I ran out of day, so all that got to take a break overnight, and now I'm going to seal everything up with some new polyurethane to protect it all. I'm using this matte finish from Varathane, and I'm going to apply it with a damp paint sponge. I gave it a really good stir to make sure that all of the components are properly distributed in the can, and then I poured some of it out into a separate container so I don't accidentally add any stain pigments into my whole can of top coat. And all I'm going to do is dip this sponge in the poly, wipe the excess off on the side of the dish, and then wipe this stuff on. Again, keeping everything moving in the same direction as the grain. Now, the water-based stains that I used are always going to pop or plump up some of the wood grain on the surface and cause it to feel kind of gritty and rough again. I like to get 2 coats of sealer on top of that and then smooth it out with some really fine grit sandpaper before I do my last coat. That way I can get it nice and smooth to the touch, but I don't have to worry about sanding any of the color away. I applied a total of 4 coats of this with that light sand after the first 2 coats had dry, and now I'm almost ready to reassemble this thing. I'm going to add some of the same driftwood color that I used for the paint wash just to unify the inside of this frame with the new wood color, since it really doesn't make sense for me to pull this all apart and sand it back. Now let's take one more peek at the orange beat up thrift store find that we started with. And this is what it looks like now. This stunning elm wood grain is now so much more visible, and now it can continue to be a beautiful, solid, sturdy piece of furniture in any home. Make sure to leave me a comment and let me know what you think about this makeover. Share it with a friend who also loves a good furniture flip, and I'll leave a few more here for you to watch next if you want. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will catch you all next time.